Hello, we're just waiting for them to fix the camera and then we start. Okay, they finished. Okay, good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of the organizing committee and STAPA, the Young Researcher Association of Institut Pasteur, to open our workshop, How to Achieve Equality in Science. The workshop aims to bring awareness about gender inequality in science. We ask the speakers to focus on actions for equality and how these actions can affect the career of young researchers. Claudine Herman will start with an overview of gender equality in Europe and France, giving us an idea of which countries are more or less advanced in this contest and current actions. Following, Anatea Brooks will introduce us to SAGA project from Unesco concerning education in early careers and giving us some hints on the science-policy interface. Marina Kvasskov will delight us with her experience in mentoring, introduce us to French mentoring programs and its benefits. Last but not least, we will have a roundtable on gender balance in career. Is gender bias really there? With distinguished researchers of Pasteur Institut, Muriel Delpierre, Yude Dereuz, and Fabrice Estavou, mediated by Jeremy Chalinier, who is co-leading an association that promotes science in gender balance. The idea of the roundtable is to discuss their personal experience, the context within Pasteur and in science as a whole, but also the role of the society as a main factor for change. All the speakers will be available for the cocktail afterwards, which will be a great opportunity to continue the discussions. On behalf of the organizing committee in STAPA, I would like to thank the kind message of support from our director, Stewart Cole, last Thursday, which was really reassuring for our initiative. And I'm more than happy to invite Professor Olivier Schwartz, the recently appointed scientific director of Pasteur Institute, to open the workshop. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to open this meeting and to welcome everybody to discuss about gender balance and actions for equality in science. I would like to congratulate the STAPA, the Students Association here at Institut Pasteur, for organizing this challenging discussion, because the gender balance issue remains a major question here at Institut Pasteur and in science in general. And I'm convinced that the solution will come from all levels of our scientific policies. Of course, it starts at schools, universities, locally, internationally, nationally, at the European levels, and there are also both private and public initiatives which are very important. I would like to highlight, for instance, the role of Unesco in following these important questions. Our new director, Stewart Cole, is very interested in those questions, and that's also the case for all the executive committee, including myself. And it is striking to see, for instance, here that at Institut Pasteur we have about 130 PIs, directors of units, and only 1/3 is currently led by female scientists. And this is true for all categories of ages. For instance, we have the so-called G5 groups, which are groups which are led by young scientists for 5 year periods. And among the 23 groups that are hosted here at Institut Pasteur, we only have 7 female scientists. So it's roughly 1/3 to 2/3, whatever the age. So that's something we would like to address, of course. And we have been in request. We are in charge of writing the next strategic plan for the Institute, and this is something that the Board of Trustees is asking us. And there is no doubt that the equality issue will be addressed in this report, and I'm sure that the STAPA may play an important role in addressing these questions and helping us to find innovative solutions or classic solutions to address this question. I will finish here my presentation again by thanking the speakers for attending this meeting, and we will have, as was just said, 3 interesting talks and then a round table. And I will introduce the first speaker, Claudine Herman, who is honorary professor at École Polytechnique, and she is the first woman ever appointed professor in 1992, 30 years ago.
Yeah,
and,
a long time ago.
Not that much. And, thank you. Depends. So thank you very much for coming.
It is my pleasure. So, has been. Alors, il faut que je parle ici. So good afternoon, and many thanks for inviting me here. As you see, I was professor of physics, not biology, of physics, and as it was told by Mr. Schwarz, I happen to be the first professor ever at École Polytechnique 198 years after the foundation of the school. I'm retired and I'm involved in 2 associations, a French one, Sciences, and a European one, the European Platform of Women Scientists. There are a few documents on the table. So I was asked to speak about my personal experience, even if it is in another discipline as yours. And then I will speak about the situation nowadays and give some national examples, different examples, of course, and I will finish by explaining how the European Union has been involved for more than 10, almost 20 years now, about the issue of women in science, and will describe the action of the European Platform of Women Scientists. Okay, so my life in some way, even if it is not very modest. So you can see my CV on a graphic form. I was born in 1945 and I retired when I was 60. And in between I went to school in girls only school, because it was like that at that time, up to baccalaureate. And I wanted to be a teacher, a secondary teacher, so I sat for the examination of École Normale Supérieure de Jeunes Filles, because at that time they were different from the boys one. And when I finished my studies, I became a lecturer at the preparation of the competitive examination called Agrégation at École Normale Supérieure in Paris. And I did my PhD at École Polytechnique. And in fact, since 1980, I was a teacher at École Polytechnique and became professor in 92, and as I explained, retired. Right in the middle, I did what was called a sabbatical in the United States. I don't know, I would use that pointer, should be that. Okay, so I was 1 year in the United States, but at that time it was a sabbatical, which means that I was in a fixed position in France and was on leave for 1 year in the United States. Okay, so this is my professional life, but you see that there is a blank, there are blanks on both sides, and everybody has got also a private life. For this is my family. Of course, I'm not going to speak about that, but when I am with students, I try to explain that you just live one life and you have to feel everything in it. So the professional life and the private life have to be compatible. Otherwise, something explodes. Okay, so now let us come to more general facts. Research nowadays is based on a common model which has been inspired by the United States after World War II. So one could think that there is a common model and everything is similar, but in fact it is partly and partly not. So concerning women scientists, which is our topic today, women and men scientists, there are similar national problems in the hiring and in the promotion of women scientists. The so-called leaky pipeline, which means that the percentage of women is higher at the beginning of the studies than at the end when at the professor level. The glass ceiling, the so-called glass ceiling, which is a transparent obstacle which prevents women from reaching the top positions of the hierarchy, and the so-called biological clock, which express that even if you wish to delay the time for having children when you are a woman, there is a limit, and in some way this is the biological clock, and if you are too old you can no longer have a family. So this should be consistent with your career in some way. Another common point in many countries is that usually the people that are teaching in higher education are also researchers, but the judgment, the assessment is mostly done on the research activity and not on the other tasks, on the other numerous tasks which are teaching, administration, science dissemination. And in most countries, as we will see, there is an imbalance between women and men in the decision position in research. Okay, so first of all, I will give just very schematic national examples. France, so we are in France, and seen from abroad, what is specific in France is a notable fertility rate. So on the average, each French woman approximately has 2 children, which for Europe is a rather high number. For young children, the école maternelle for children from 3 to 6 are free of cost. For infants, there are systems which are not optimal, but are much better than in other European countries, for example. In politics, in 1999 and 2000, there have been laws on parity. The situation before that was not very good. Now it is rather... what happens? It is not too bad, but people in France are very often against quota because of what we call universalism, which means making no difference between different categories, men and women and so on. So when people speak of quota, usually they are not in favor of quota. Now there are quotas for the board of administration of the big companies. There was a law for that. I personally was educated in a school-only higher education place, École Normale Supérieure de Jeunes Filles, so I am a product of the quotas, so I cannot be against a system that carried me in some way. What is also surprising for people from outside France is the dual system of higher education with on the one side the grandes écoles and on the other side the universities. Of course, in other countries there are universities, but they are ranked, and there are some that are better than the other ones. For example, in the United States, everybody knows that Harvard or Stanford are better than other places, but they are all under the same name, university, whereas in France we have 2 systems. And one specificity also of the French system is that for people that reach permanent position in public research, this occurs in the early 30s up to now. So it is an age at which you can still have a family after that. Okay, so the numbers, well, putting together the whole public research, there is 1/3 of women among the scientists. And in higher education, here are the data for 2016. For all disciplines, the percentage of maître de conférence, assistant professor, is 44% of women, and among the professors there are 24% of women. But now, if you look the big categories, of course it is very much dependent. In art it is much higher than in science, and in science there is 1/3 of women among the assistant professor and 18% in 2016 of women among the science professor, with still differences among the discipline. At the CNRS, which is the big the biggest research institution in public research, in 2015, also 1/3 of the researchers were women. For the lower rank chargé de recherche, there were 38% of women among the chargés de recherche and 28% among the research directors. In the support staff, among the engineers and the technical and administrative staff, the percentage of women were higher. One particular fact with CNRS is that these percentages of researchers have been always the same since the foundation of CNRS before World War II. They were at 30%, now they are at 34%, which is not a huge progress. There have been differences among the fields, but with the same global percentage, which is a bit discouraging. Whereas in higher education, as you can see on this graph, there is some progress. So the graph starts in 1981, 81 here, and it ends now. And the two lower curves are for professors, and the top curves are for assistant professor. And there are two different fields. One is health, and the other one is science. And you see that the percentage of professor along the years versus time is very, very similar in science and in health, whereas the percentage of assistant professor is very different. It is much higher in the health field. Now there are more women than men as assistant professor in the health, but yet the percentage of professor is around 20%. To go a little further, it is interesting to define an indicator which is the male advantage, which compares the possibility for men and women to reach grade A. Of course, the total number of men and the total number of women are quite different. It depends on the discipline. But if you compare the total number and the number of people that are on the top positions, you can have an index, an indicator, and gives you some idea. Okay, so on this table, I compare what is in the French universities up there in biology, biochemistry, and chemistry, and you see percentages of women professor, of women assistant professor, and this no dimension index, and you can see that even if the percentage of women assistant professor is higher in biology and biochemistry than in chemistry, the percentage of women of professors un problème of connection. Ça tombe, ça. Il faut le mettre là, comme ça. J'ai tombé. Mais ça va revenir, non? Ou alors c'est peut-être pas assez vissé. C'est bon. Formidable, merci. Okay. So, you see that the percentage of professor is somewhat different, and you find that the male advantage is much higher in biology and biochemistry than in chemistry. And at CNRS, all these indexes, all these indicators are lower than in university, showing that, in fact, there is more to do in universities to reach the equality than in CNRS. And in some cases, in mathematics, for example, here the index is below 1, meaning that the promotion of women in mathematics is better than the promotion of men. And when it is exactly 1, it means that the promotion hope is similar. So here again, among the different disciplines that are listed, biology, chemistry, physics, computer science, and mathematics, it is in biology that the male advantage is the strongest. Okay, so this is the situation. I summarize at the top. Approximately 1/3 of women, a slow progress in university. We saw the graph, stability at CNRS. And for the last 20 years, there have been some structures created in favor of women scientists. In 2001, a mission for parity was created at the Ministry of Higher Education and Research, and at the same year at CNRS. And after that, in most public research institutions, there have been such offices for equal opportunity. At the ministry, there is a committee for professional equality in higher education and research. Now, to understand the situation, gender studies are needed, and in 2006, the Paris region, la région de France, created Institut du Châtelet, which gathered the gender studies for this region, and it was funded by Paris region, in particular a certain number of PhD scholarships were funded. And now, since the political side of the Paris region changed, now there is no longer any fund for PhDs concerning gender studies, but they still continue to have seminar and communication activities. And anywhere in France, the recognition of the gender studies field was much later than in other countries. In 2013, there has been a law on higher education and research in which there is a section concerning gender equality, but I'm not sure that you are concerned here because you are not a university. You are not exactly in the same frame as the higher education.
Yeah,
I don't. Well, it can be inspiring, but probably you are not in the law, in this law. So one of the items was to create equal opportunities officers in universities, but the law did not specify with which budget, with which possible practical situation. And in this law also it was stated that there should be gender balance representation in a certain number of committees. Okay, so now just a little word about what we do in the French Association Femmes et Sciences. In fact, there are 3 items, but there are 2 main fields. One is to encourage more girls and boys to enter science, so meeting young people, and the other side is to have solidarity, to improve the situation of women already in scientific jobs. Okay, so just a little comment. So we go to classes as witnesses, as role models, and in fact we meet, last year it was 9,000 children over France. Since one class is about 25 to 30, it is a lot of classes, but as one class of age is 700,000 kids, we are very, very far from meeting many of them. Okay, but at least we try. Okay, let us say a few words about Germany. So Germany is a rather newer country than France. It was the whole Germany, the unified Germany, started only in 1871 after the defeat of France against Prussia. And at that time, the head of Germany was the Chancellor Bismarck, and he was speaking of the 3K for women, that is Kinder, Küche, Kirche, which means children, kitchen, church. So it was not work, it was at home. At least for the women of the upper classes that could afford staying at home. Then there was some progress towards work for women, but then came the Third Reich, which sent back home the women that could go back home. So the tradition and the minds of the people are quite different from those in France. And concerning science, first children they start 1 year later than in France, then they finish the secondary school 1 year later than in France, and then they are very slow in their higher education studies until they do their PhD, and after that there is a compulsory geographical mobility until the habilitation, which is about the age of 40. So it's not very easy to have a family in these conditions. Germany was reunified just after the wall fell in Berlin at the end of '89, and before that there were two very different situations in the western part and in the Federal Republic of Germany, and in the eastern part, the Democratic Republic of Germany. So in the eastern part, as it was a communist country, women should work. It was not a choice, they should work, and there were systems to take care of children. In the eastern part, in the western side, well, it was much more difficult, and after the reunification, the model was the western one, with very difficult child care, school for children from 7 to 11 only in the morning. I have 2 German grandchildren, and they are out of school at 12:30. So either you have somebody at home or you have to not to work for that. So at least it puts a dilemma between the family and the career. So when Mrs. Merkel became Chancellor, many years ago, she tried to improve the situation, and there were many discussions in the magazines, the people speaking of the ladies that wanted to work as Rabensmutter, which means crow-mother, Mère Corbeau. So it's not a very kind word, and the consequence of this difficulty is that there is a very low women fertility rate, which is not very good for the country, of course. So Mrs. Merkel put law about a modified parental leave in which the father has to take some time also, and they voted additional crèche for infants, for babies, and they were accused of transforming the women into Geburtsmaschinen, which means a machine to make children. Okay, so these were very type of arguing that I imagine existed in France before World War II. Okay, so concerning women scientists, since the 90s there have been actions, and in fact their percentage of women researchers in Germany is higher than in France. Women among the researchers is higher than in France, but the problem with these women is that very often they have to choose between their career and having a family. Since the 90s, there have been women in the universities' recruitment committees, but they are observers, they have no voting right in that. And there are structures like the Center of Excellence Women in Science, which are supporting women scientists. There is an equality label which is attributed to the public or private sector. So there is quite a lot of money, governmental money, devoted to this issue of women and science. And more precisely in research, since 2008, the structure, the DFG, the structure that is funding research, has had declarations concerning gender equality in science. They have standards for that, the DFG research-oriented standards on gender equality, and they have a toolbox for the research institutions with examples of good practice for gender equality. And for the universities, there is a specific program to hire women. Professorinnen, this is a feminine. It is the Federal Ministry of Education and Research that is financing it. And you see the amount of money, which is not negligible. It is hundreds of millions of euros. And in this program, they could hire 260 new women professors. And this program has been renewed. And for a university to get this money to have a new women professor, they have to show that they are practicing gender equality. So for Portugal, I will be very short. In fact, in Portugal, there is approximately equality between men and women in research, but not in the top position of research. And our friends from the Portuguese Women Scientists Association are working with the cartoonists, and well, you see what they draw. Some people said that the lady has less steps to climb, but they are a bit difficult. Okay, so now I will come to the European Union. And first of all, say just one word about the European structures, and then explain what the Directorate General Research of the European Commission has been doing in favor of women scientists, and then I will say a word about this association. So, probably you know, but it took me some time to understand, so I show it, how the European Union is working. So, first of all, you will be electing European members of the European Parliament in 2019. This is this part, so this is the people from the countries of Europe. In France, well, the number of members depends on the size of the countries, and in France there are approximately 80 members of the European Parliament that we will have to elect. Now, we have also quite a few times a year the European Council is meeting, and it is the heads of states and of government. This slide should be corrected because now, because of the Brexit, there are only 27 of them. Okay, but and there is something which is quite misleading, because there is another structure which has approximately the same name, which is the Council of the European Union. So when they are speaking of research, these are the ministers of research of the member states. When they are speaking of agriculture, it is the Minister of Agriculture. So it depends on the topic which is treated. And the administration of all that is the Commission. There are 20 commissioners, there are 27 member states, so approximately each country has a commissioner. And like the ministries, there are different ones, education, research, and I will now speak about research. So, in general, equality between men and women is something, a major point, what they call a pillar, inside the Union Treaty. And it is, it was, the last time it was specified was in the Amsterdam Treaty of 1997. Now the argument for having more women in science is the following. Europe is concerned by competitivity and to be competitive with the other countries. So around 2000 it was United States and Japan, after it was the emerging countries and so on. They calculate that a bigger scientific workforce is needed. So they expressed that, for example, in Lisbon and Barcelona when they were they had the presidency of Europe, and these were the objective for 2010, but in 2010 they expressed objective for 2020, and again they need more, they said they need more workforce. So if they need more workforce, they have to look for people that are not yet in this scientific workforce, and of course there are people with socially disadvantaged background, but they are more difficult to find, and there are women, so they are in favor of more women in science, and they declare it and they fund it also. So as early as 1998, a devoted unit, which was called at that time Women in Science, was created at Directorate General Research. It changed of name, but it is still there. And so it is a unit that stays and that is funding and having activities that I will describe. And there is also a group of national civil servants from the member states, the so-called Helsinki group, because it was founded in Helsinki, which there are people that are in some way the experts on the topics of women in science or gender issues in research. And they meet twice a year. And the activities, first of all, are statistics to understand what is the situation. So every 3 years, a booklet is published which is called She, the contrary of he, and figures, that is numbers, which is comparative, and I will show you some examples. Then there are plenty of reports on the issue of women and science, and they are also funding projects related to gender in science, and there is a gender watch system, and of course this platform. Okay, so some data, first of all, and okay, maybe it is small, but just watch the arrows. So in 1997-98 already there were data collected about the percentage of women among the university professors in various European countries, and at that time there were no Eastern countries yet in Europe. And these are the data of 2013 that were published in 2015. So these are decreasing from the highest percentage to the lowest percentage, and this is the average of the countries, of the European countries, which is close to 21% of women among the university professors. And you see that at that time we are, in France, below the European average. Okay, so I just put an arrow for Switzerland, which is not a European country, but which is taking part in the framework programs. There are some countries associated to the framework program. This is the case of Switzerland. So Switzerland in the 90s was, like Germany, very bad, with 5.7% of women among the university professors. And they started the program in 2000, and they put quite a lot of money to encourage assistant professors to have better CV, go to conferences, be well known, to be able to apply to professorship and become professor. And the result is here, 19%. So they increased from do we see? They increased very much more than we did, because, I'm surprised because I think they were lower, because they've put a lot of money in the problem. This issue cannot improve by itself. We need more. So you have the percentage of university professors, but you also have other criteria. And this is two French academicians with their green coats noticing in 1971 that the first women academicians appeared in France. This is a drawing by the late Volinsky. You know all that Volinsky was killed at Charlie Hebdo a few years ago, unfortunately. But this cartoon shows the surprise of these old academicians. Okay, so the type of data that you can find in the booklets of EU are, first of all, this one, which is a scissor diagram. It represents, for a given year, not for the same people, but for a given year, the percentage of men and women among the students at the beginning, among the PhD students, among the assistant professor and the professor. And since usually when you add men plus women, you get to 100%, there is a symmetry in the drawing. You can notice that can be folded. Okay. So you also notice that this is all discipline together. At the beginning, there are in almost every European countries as many women than men. Well, it is 45 to 55, but very, very close. And when you get to professor, it collapses to about 20%. Okay. If we focus on science and engineering, it is worse. Well, it is different, first of all, because you see that at the beginning, you are not close to 50%. It is more like 30% of women instead of 50. And then, of course, well, as you do the other one, you collapse to low numbers. So this one is a grade A percentage of women grade A among the academic staff. So it means for here, for France, the professor or the research directors. And here again, also you have men and women, the two colors are men and women. And first of all, you see that in some countries there are more people grade A than in other countries. In France, we are quite high, which means that in a researcher career, there is greater probability to become grade A. In other countries, if you look at the bottom, for example, Portugal, there are very few people with grade A. And of course, less women than men, but very, very few compared to here. And okay, so we are not in the best, we are here. And the top ones are usually the Baltic states, in which there are very few positions anyway. Okay, so maybe you can see better. So this is the percentage of women researchers according to discipline, and the blue one are the lower one. In biology, in physics, we are in natural science, and 31% in Germany is the lowest, and 29 in UK are the lowest number, and in Spain and in Italy we are at 40%. In engineering, the numbers are still lower, and in humanities they are higher. Now it is the people that are in grade A, so a top position, and you see again Germany very low, and the Latin countries higher, and okay, and again very low numbers, very low figures in engineering and technologies. So what should be done? Should something be done, and what should be done? So the first point, the minimum point, is equality of treatment. So this cartoon that was published in the first European report shows that fairness is not enough, because even if all the animals have to climb the tree, there is a handicap for some of them, and well, you cannot tell if a woman scientist is the goldfish or the monkey or the elephant, but at least equality is not fairness in some way. So if it is not that, maybe if there is a handicap, there should be a positive discrimination, but this brings a lot of problems. Even in Scandinavian countries, there are suits, there are law actions against positive discrimination. So what the European Commission proposes is to have gender mainstreaming, which means integrating gender in all actions and all activities, but it is not so simple to do. Okay, so, well, maybe it's not worth reading the whole slide, but there have been a lot of reports about the situation, the status quo of women in science in the public sector and Western Europe, in the public sector, Western and Eastern Europe, in industrial research, in the place of gender with respect to excellence, the financing according to gender, and, well, so things are well known. The next step is to do something, and what is now the motto of the EU is structural changes in research institutions to increase excellence for that. So the policies in favor of women at DG Research have successively been sensitize the scientific community to this problem. Then, because women did not manage to be promoted as well as men, the second idea was to teach women the codes to be like men and to be promoted like men. And later on, since around 2011, the direction is to change the institution, the so-called structural changes, to include better women and men at the same time, because if there are some changes to improve the life of women, of course men will be happy to take advantage of them. And the current objectives are now better women participation, a better balance of between men and women in decision positions, and introduction of the gender dimension in research. This has been so for 6-7 years, and in some parts, in some disciplines, it's very clear that taking into account the fact that the object of research are men or women, either in medicine, in biology, or even in social science, will lead to much better research. In some other fields like theoretical physics, it's more difficult to do, but anyway, introducing history of science and the place of science in society for men and women is useful for all students. Okay, so this expresses on an official document these priorities, and now I will say a few words about this association. So the European Commission understood rather quickly that initiatives should come from the top, but should also come from the bottom, that is from the women scientists themselves, because there were plenty of actions, but were they adapted to what the women scientists were wishing? So they pushed to the creation of an association, which is under Belgian law, a non-profit international association, Association Internationale Sans But Lucratif, the members of which are networks or associations of women scientists over Europe, plus some individuals from all disciplines and from the public and private sector. So, in fact, their goals are a bit complicated, like what is all what is said in Europe, but the main goal is to bring the voice of European women scientists at Brussels level. That is, for example, when a new framework program is being created, which is the case now, make sure that women's concerns are included. And the second point is related to the gender dimension in science. Okay, so like all associations, we are doing, I'm the president of the European platform have been since September. We are doing networking. We try to make women scientists heard, which means that we are having conferences, we are sending position papers, and we have contacts with the Commission, with the European Parliament. And of course, since we are all over Europe, we are in contact through an electronic platform. At the beginning, there was a very strong funding by the European Commission, but such fundings cannot be forever, and it is very difficult to have a sponsorship from one country to another. So a French company, if a French company is funding a Belgian association, it is not tax deductible, so it's difficult to get funds, and now we are just an ordinary association working on our members' voluntary work. So we have a website, a newsletter, we write position paper, we are organizing conferences, participating to events, and for example, here on the right you see a lunchtime debate that we organized at the European Parliament in Brussels last September, and on the left a letter that we wrote to the President of the European Commission after his speech on the State of Union, because on his speech there are plenty of great objectives. There is no single human being referred to, neither women nor men. So we try to explain that research cannot be done without people, and that being interested by people could be a point for Europe to be better considered by European citizens. Okay, so we also in particular, our German colleagues are very much interested in the problem of gender dimension in science and research. In Germany, the situation is a bit different from that in France, in that there are many people that would be ready to put gender dimension in a research project, but that it is badly considered by the German juries. So they have the tools, they have the ideas, but it is working against them. So in our association, of course, we are participating to gender-related European projects, and we are also producing every year a benchmarking report for the French Ministry of Research. They give the topic. We use our European link to try and answer the French ministry what is done in the other countries on a specific topic. So last year it was a survey on academic statuses in various European countries, permanent position, non-permanent position, and so on. So we spoke about 10 different countries. And this year we are going to do a work about support to female and male PhD students and postdocs, and specific training for their better professional integration into academic and non-academic world. In fact, the topics that they are giving are the topic on which they are working in France, and they want to have some ideas from abroad. So, one of the things that, since we are members over Europe, we are interviewing them on our website, and we collected the interviews in the booklet. It is interesting to see what are the main activities in different countries. In some places, in some countries, the focus is mainly on young people to create the idea of science among the teenagers. In other countries, it is more focused on human research concerning women scientists. And okay, so we have also a newsletter that is issued every second month. And since there are we have 7 French full members, we meet together for brainstorming in Paris. So I conclude, I hope I was not too long. So in fact, I tried to show to you, but very briefly, that there is a variety of national situations in spite of many common points, that there is a progress since 20 years, let us say, but more actions are still needed. The European Union created a very important impetus on this issue, and I tried also to show that political approaches and associative approaches are mutually complementary, and I think both are needed. Thanks a lot.
I think we have time for questions now. Raise your hand.
Hello, thank you very much. It was a very nice talk. And I would just like to make several comments. So first, you talked about male advantage. Hello?
About what? Sorry?
About male advantage coefficient.
Ah, yes, so it's a number. It's a number.
Yes, of course. But you just mentioned that in mathematics, in fact, we can see that females get promoted more.
A little more.
A little more.
Yes.
But I just want to know that, in fact, maybe in mathematics they get selected very, very early.
Well, it is very complicated in France because in mathematics there are very few people at CNRS, full-time researchers. They are in universities. So, in fact, it is also a problem of the community who is making the promotions. So I think that they are probably more supportive, but the number of female mathematicians is dropping down in France.
Exactly, that's my point.
It is dropping down.
But in fact there is so little number of female mathematicians that maybe at the end they are actually selected very early, so they are in fact very good.
Yes. Yeah.
That's why they have a better chance to get promoted, because in fact they get selected very early.
It is not a good model because anyway the number is dropping. So, no. But I mean, you can have an almost balanced situation, and you can also it is not a balanced situation because there are very few.
Yeah.
But the few in this discipline are promoted rather easily compared to other disciplines. In physics, I was alone for many years, but I was promoted. In spite of the fact that we were very few, we were promoted.
This question, congratulations for that, but then, as you said, you are a product, in your words, of quota. Mm-hmm. Do you think that you would have that chance if there was not that initial quota?
I'm not sure.
Exactly.
I'm not sure, because when I succeeded, I was not the first among the girls. I was the 8th out of 20. So I was not the best, I was not the worst. If you put the two schools together, maybe I would not have entered. Yeah. Well, I would have become a secondary school teacher. Nobody would have cried. I would have pupils and so on.
Maybe we would have cried, because if there was no...
No, okay, you don't. You cannot say. So it was an opportunity, clearly. But when I finished, when I did my PhD, when I was out of the school, I had to work like the other one. And if I had been bad, everybody would have known it.
Yeah.
So anyway, at some stage, you are in front of truth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the last question that I have is the thing that I actually don't know, because I know that there are programs to support PhD students, and there are fundings for specifically female students or female postdocs, like Loreal Scholarship or something like that.
There are not so many types.
There are not so many, but there are some. Is there anything of that similar kind for female PIs to get projects on a higher level that is just for females, since there are so little of them? Is it something like that that a female PI, principal investigator, the professor, can have easier access to some grant?
I'm not sure, but I know that, for example, ERC, the European Research Council, they are now watching very, very carefully the gender disaggregated data on this kind of topic for the younger people grant, for the advanced grants, and so on. So probably there is no advantage, but there is much attention, and I would think that if two people are at equality, they would prefer to take the women, but there is no publicist advantage.
Yes, because I think as you have spoken about differences in how we classify people as scientists and their quality and so on, how we assess, I think still women have much more disadvantage due to the family life and due to many other obstacles in life, that at the end when they come to this level, I think it's harder for them at the end to get these grants, to support their lab, to support their students. I believe there could be this issue.
I'm sure there are, in some countries, I would have to look carefully, there are coaching for that.
Thank you.
There are probably coaching for that. I would not say in France, but I'm sure in other Europe there are places where they help women already in their career to go higher. Yes, another question?
Has a comment over there?
Sorry, yes, I just wanted to mention that in France we have the Prix Irène Joliot-Curie for young women leaders, young women who are PIs. It's not a huge grant, but it's similar to the Loreal Unesco for PhDs.
So every year there is one young woman award, somebody who is less than 12 years in research after a PhD, and there is another award for somebody who is at the end of her career. There are two people every year since 2002.
I have another question.
Yeah?
Hi.
Hello? Yeah.
Okay. Hi. Can you hear me now? I was wondering, I was surprised that the male advantage is strongest in biology, whereas there's like the more women. So do you have an explanation for that?
Well, I'm not in this field. I think it is related to the culture in the field. What I noticed when I was in my physics lab at École Polytechnique, next to me there was a biochemistry lab. I was friends with colleagues there, and they did not work on Wednesday. Well, it was right, but I am sure that when you compare the records or the application files of somebody who is full-time and somebody who is not full-time, it is a disadvantage. Maybe if it is in the culture and it is convenient, it's not needed for the career, but it's probably not the whole explanation. So what are the criteria of excellence to be promoted? Maybe some of them are not favorable. I don't know.
Can I ask one more question? I was because it's interesting to hear from women to understand what made you what made it possible for you. You think to like?
Okay, I can tell you. So when you are the first woman, I've been alone in my lab for many years. It's because you are supported by men. So I was supported by my husband. We were married in 69, so that means 48 years ago, and we hope to go to 50. And my PhD advisor, who was my collaborator for my whole scientific lab, was somebody who was extremely supportive as well. In teaching also, I was supporting people. Maybe they supported me because I was worth being supported, I don't know. But there are other women that need not so supportive people, I would say.
Thank you.
I think I'll make one final question then, if no one else. If anyone is interested in joining you in the Femmes en Sciences or the EPWS, what could they do, or how could they join these platforms?
Well, of course, there are websites, there are a few papers on the desk. The main activity at Femmes en Sciences is towards college, lycée, towards the kids, just to explain what is science and that not everybody has got a Nobel Prize and that if they want they can come and so on. So we need many people for that because it is any day, any place in France. City is the main activity, but on the other hand, there are also other activities concerning growing up, so you can. At the European platform, the main interest, in my point of view, is not what is going on in Brussels, which is a bit Brussels-like, but to know people from other countries. From other associations, and you see that their concerns are not the same because the political, the historical situation of the different European countries, but it could also be different over the world, but we are all limited to Europe, are very, very different. For example, the Eastern countries, they don't have the same culture of association as we have because in the communist time there was one association, it was the party, and the rest was forbidden. So they have a peculiar idea of democracy because they are not used, and that is interesting also. But if you want to, when there will be the cocktail, I will be happy to speak. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudine. So I have now the pleasure to introduce Anatea Brooks. She worked for the past 13 years in the Unesco, and then soon she will join the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs here in Paris as well. Her main focus has been the science policy interface for biodiversity and climate science. She has taught in University of Milano, New York, and also in Columbia University with the biodiversity conservation at Maryland on earth science based on NASA. And at Unesco specifically, she was a focal point for gender equality in natural science, and she helped to create the SAGA project. She will talk to us today. Thank you very much.
I'm going to just use this. Okay. Thank you, Carolina, and thanks to the other members of the organizing group. It's a great pleasure to be here today. I'm going to talk about 4 things each fairly shortly. What UNESCO does about collecting gender disaggregated data globally, what the SAGA, STEM and Gender Advancement Project that I created is doing, other things that UNESCO does about women in science, and a bit about my own work on gender equality in climate science and climate policy, which is how I started. But I thought since the preceding speaker went through their bio a little bit, I thought I would just add to what Carolina said to say, I didn't start out working on gender equality, and I didn't even really see it as a problem in science. I saw gender equality being a problem when I was working in development for very poor countries, when I worked at the International Fund for Agricultural Development. Then I went back to graduate school in the United States. I'm an American. I'm an ecologist, and my concern was getting people in the public to care about science and to want to study it. So with those 2 backgrounds sort of led me to where I got to today. I just retired from UNESCO 2 months ago, and a week from today I'll start working for the Special Envoy on the Oceans, working under the UN Secretary General, and I will try and embed a little bit about gender into that as well. So what is UNESCO? United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. It works to help 195 member states and 10 associate member states to learn how to do things. We say we have 5 functions: serving as a laboratory of ideas, setting standards, catalyzing international cooperation, being a clearinghouse, and helping to build capacity. I worked in the natural science sector. The areas that we covered were science policy, hydrology, earth science, the basic sciences, ecological sciences, oceanography, but we did not cover agriculture, which is done by the Food and Agricultural Organization, or health sciences, which is done by the World Health Organization. So gender equality is one of the 2 global priorities at UNESCO, and UNESCO believes that it's not only a fundamental human right, but it's a necessary condition for sustainable and peaceful societies, and within science, it's a crucial means to promoting scientific excellence and increasing the knowledge generation in individual countries. At the very beginning of 2008, a network of gender focal points was created, and I was named the Gender Focal Point for Natural Sciences. At the end of the talk, you'll see why they picked me. I hope you are aware of the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, and number 5 is about gender equality and women's empowerment. But the way that I look at it and UNESCO looks at it, gender equality is important to almost all of these goals. Science, technology, and innovation, which I'll henceforth call STI, is also very important for them. But where did those 2 things actually meet? It's on some specific targets. 4.3, which is in education, making sure that men and women have access to tertiary education. 5.5 and 5.C within the gender equality. 9.5, which is trying to increase the number of people in science and technology in all countries, and 17.18, which is about indicators, statistics, and measurement, that everything should be gender disaggregated as well as being disaggregated by lots of other diversity points. I think we'll skip the scissors diagram because fortunately it was covered before. The point is that in the STEM, you can't even call it a scissors because those 2 curves are far apart from each other. Oops, that was not there when I was putting this together. So over lunch we were talking about, well, it must be that this status of women in science is better in North America and Europe than in other countries. Here's a breakdown of statistics from the UNESCO Institute of Statistics, showing that in yellow you have a circling around the region where we are now, and it's not at the high end. Who is at the high end? It's Central Asia and Latin America and the Caribbean at being more or less at parity. The Institute of Statistics gathers data from government statistics offices. It does so on education, and for science, what they've looked at up until now is just research and development or innovation. So looking at the percentage of women researchers, the darker the color, the more women there are involved here, and it would look as if let's say the Russian Federation and Latin America are showing up really well. Notice how Africa is really multicolored. We'll go into that in the next slide, but also notice all the blank areas. One problem with UNESCO statistical information is that Canada, the United States, India, and China, and Australia, amongst other countries, their data isn't comparable, so it cannot be captured into the system. So when we want to go into detail about women in science, we have to also look at national statistics on our own. So in Africa, the more red it is, the more women there are. So I see only one country, Tunisia, up at the top, that is more or less at parity at being between 45 and 55% women researchers. And this data goes back 2 years. So the other priority at UNESCO is Africa. So the work that I've been doing is primarily focused on Africa and other developing countries. Here, looking at the head count, how many people are there working in engineering and technology, the Russian Federation looks fantastic. But then when you look to say, okay, how many of those are full-time? You end up with the countries where you have people working full-time that are with parity with women are the Philippines, Singapore, Qatar, and Turkey. The next country down is Poland with 40% women researchers. So clearly we have a lot more to do. We talk about two kinds of segregation, horizontal and vertical. Horizontal segregation talks about over or underrepresentation of one gender by profession. So this data is not from the UNESCO Institute of Statistics, but from the UNESCO Science Report, most recent issue, towards 2030, a chapter called Is the Gender Gap Narrowing in Science and Engineering? And I'll leave a copy of that with you. It's also available on our website. I just wanted to point out a few things that you could see there. If you look at medical sciences, look at Togo at the bottom. 8.3% of the people who are researchers in medical sciences are women. Then look at Kazakhstan. Of the data we've collected, the highest is 69.5%. Unfortunately, France wasn't in this data set, so I couldn't flag it. But if you would have asked me, somebody who doesn't know a whole lot about medical science, I would have assumed that parity or equality of numbers would have been more expected. I expected engineering and technology and natural sciences to be where the really low numbers were. Also, looking at graduates from tertiary education, which means the third level of education, so the bachelor's degree in most cases, we see for health and welfare the highest and the lowest, both were Bs, Bangladesh and Brunei Darussalam. But here we had France, and it's 74.4% of graduates in what is called the health and welfare sector were women. But vertical segregation doesn't talk by discipline, it talks by where you are in your career. And previous speaker talked about A. What does that mean? It's a seniority grade from the Frascati Manual on Statistics, and it's the equivalent of a full professorship. So that's happening towards the end of your career. We start with level D as a PhD student, and C as a postdoc, and B as an assistant professor. But when you want to go even beyond being a professor, if you look at university chancellors and vice chancellors in public universities, the person who made this slide for me, he picked the best data that he could find. Brazil, 14%, South Africa, 17%. Vice directors of national research centers, Argentina, 16%. Directors of scientific research institutes, Mexico, 10%, United States, 23%. This all is fairly dismal, if you ask me. And then members of science academies, and we already heard a little bit about that. There's only 3 countries where more than a quarter of the members are women, and that's Cuba, Panama, and South Africa. UNESCO decided to do something about that, and they're doing training programs with what used to be called the Third World Academy of Sciences, now the Academy of Science for Developing Countries, is trying to get academies in those countries to nominate women more often. You might be familiar with the fact that the Netherlands recently said it will take us 200 years to come to parity if we just follow a natural course. So for now on, every second session, you can only nominate women until we get up to parity, and then we'll go back to not thinking about it. So all of that was background. I was named the gender focal point. I knew UNESCO did lots of things to improve the status of women in science, but I didn't know, are we doing the right things? I didn't know what we should be doing, and as I was looking at these numbers and reading things, I could tell we didn't really know enough at the global level to even know where to start. So we can say we're losing talent. The women in developing countries in particular who are not going into science mean those countries are losing talent. There aren't sex disaggregate data on drivers and barriers to progression in science, and we need a way to have cross-nationally comparable statistics. And there just really weren't enough ways to understand how this was influencing policies in STI to focus on gender equality. So I put together a project that I I called STEM and Gender Advancement, or SAGA, SAGA being an Icelandic goddess of wisdom. And I asked two colleagues who I had read good reports from, both men, and both with a background in statistics and science policy, to join me. And in fact, one of them would have been speaking here today instead of me, but he's in Namibia talking to the ministers about science policy. We created the project, we got funds, and we hired a man, and then we hired a woman. So of our team of 5 core people, there's only 2 women. It's just kind of, but that shows that it's not about being a woman or a man, it's an important issue to science. So the other members of the team today are in Sudan, where the government has invited us to help them figure out how to improve the situation of women in that country. So the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency gave us our funds at the very end of 2014. The project will end at the end of 2018, and what we're trying to do is understand and reduce the gender gap in STEM at all levels of education and research, identify gaps in science policies, build capacity to collect data in the national statistics offices, and then inform Unesco what have we found to be the most important drivers and barriers so that we can target them better. I mentioned that we were 3 core people in the beginning. We call this the steering committee, but we thought we needed to have the best experts in the world to tell us if we were doing the right thing. And She Figures was talked about before, so we have the statistician from She Figures on our core team, so the European Union. We have the American Association for Advancement of Science, OECD, UN Women, and the statistics officer there is another man. And then we have, with the outside, the white part of the egg, we have other collaborating institutions such as the World Intellectual Property Rights, and with them, they are looking at granting patents, and they will give their data to us. International Development Bank is also looking at women in innovation, and we decided, let us not all try to do the same thing. Let's chop things up and have different organizations do their parts and then put everything together later on. So we start with something we call the Science, Technology, and Innovation Gender Objectives List. I call that the STI goal, and I'll go into more detail on it. We have a toolkit. We build capacities on 2 different things: gender equality in science policy and gender equality in indicators and data measuring that. So we have 4 books so far, the toolkit, the STI goal, and 2 survey instruments, one on gender equality in STI policies, and one on the drivers and barriers to careers in science and engineering. And these are all being tested in SAGA pilot countries, plus some institutional populations. So now I'm going to go into great detail on this because I think it's probably what's most helpful for you. We spent 1 whole year reading the literature to figure out where could the problems be, because everybody hears anecdotes and you think, oh, problem X is definitely where we need to spend our money. But I felt like we need data to show that that's the most important problem. So we tried to synthesize into a number of objectives that was small enough that a country can deal with. So we have 7 of them, but they all have sub-objectives. So that's on the screen is the short version of the title. I'll read the longer version of the title. The first one, change perceptions, attitudes, behaviors, social norms, and stereotypes towards women in STEM and society. Second, engage girls and young women in STEM, primary and secondary education, as well as in technical and vocational education and training. Third, attraction, access to, and retention of women in STEM higher education at all levels. And that has 6 different subcomponents, including things like promote gender equality and international mobility of students. 4, Gender equality and career progression for scientists and engineers. That has 8 subcomponents. 5, promote the gender dimension in research content, practice, and agendas. And here of particular attention to your institution, promote gender-sensitive analysis and research hypotheses and consideration of sex of research subjects. I hope everybody here already knows this. If you don't, you can go to the literature and find out why this really matters. The 6th is promote gender equality in STEM-related policy making. And the 7th is promote gender equality in science and technology-based entrepreneurship and innovation activities. The book is bilingual, French on one side, English on the other, and again, it's available on our website, but I'll leave one hard copy for you to use. The toolkit, the next element in our working papers, defines some key terms. For example, what is sex? What is gender? What is parity, equity, and equality? And all these words get mixed up a lot, and I just wanted to show you, I probably can't see it, there are pizza ingredients. This is from a video that's about equality and water management, and they used making a pizza to talk about how equity is important in your working group. All those pizza ingredients are different heights, so they need a stool of a different height so that they have equal access to look out the window. So that's what equity is about. It's getting, and this might be considered things that you would do to give special preference, but not necessarily. Whereas equality is when you're not even noticing there's an issue anymore because everybody treats everybody else equally. And that's where we're aiming to get to. We have a set of tools in here to help with designing and understanding how policies are put together, and then a guide to the places where they can, in countries, they can already find some indicators. They can be in different ministries all across the country. Then the third book is a survey of gender equality and STI policies and instruments, and this is for the national level. So if I talk about universities, it's the national university, which is the case in many countries. Then another one that I think could be useful if Pasteur as an institution wanted to look at it, you collect data on students, researchers, and others who have a STEM education, and people who are part of the science and engineering workforce. You might think those are the same populations, but the truth is they're not the same. We assume they overlap largely. So you might want to look at who are the people who got a PhD in science, but then they didn't go on for a career in that field, and find out why didn't that happen, so that you can change your educational system, or maybe it's actually a good thing because scientific literacy is so important. It's good to have emissaries all over the place. So in this survey, which will be about the size of this book and should be ready by the end of this month, we have modules for people to talk about personal characteristics, their educational experience and background, their post-grad experience, their early and later employment, what are the policies in their organization, and of course, if don't know is an answer. Have you taken a career break? How did that affect things? What funding have you gotten? Did you feel you got the support you needed in finding out about funding? What kind of professional recognition and awards have you received? How do you use your time? And that's a place where the difference between men and women in academia often shows up. Who's doing research? Who's doing teaching? Who's doing service to the community? That can be called committee work, but it can be other things too. When I worked at Columbia University, I had the great pleasure to create 7 new degree programs there, including a PhD. And one thing we tried to do was change the rules about tenure track and make it absolutely mandatory for everybody to do outreach to the community, teach in science museums, talk to schools like the previous speaker was talking about that they're doing in high schools here. It's so important. This is how you attract other people to come into your field. Work-life balance, discrimination and harassment, attitudes and social norms, role models. Who is important for you in particular? Getting the data from everybody in institution on these questions really helps to identify what are the things that are working and things that are not working. What do we need to be doing to improve how we go? So we've actually had several universities or research institutions around the world already want to do that, even though our focus had been on doing countries. We promised Sweden we'd do at least 10 countries around the world. So we have in Africa, Liberia, Sudan, the Gambia, Lebanon for the Arab states. In Asia and the Pacific, we have Thailand. In the Caribbean, Jamaica and Haiti. In Latin America, Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay. And in North America, the province of Quebec in Canada. You would think, why is UNESCO helping Quebec? They don't need any help, and I would agree with that, and that's what we said. But they were so excited about this because they've already tried to identify what is working and what is not working, and they came to an impasse, and they thought our project could help them to move forward, so they're paying for all of it. We don't have to do anything except give them the ideas, and they're using our tools. And we should have the feedback from all of those countries by the end of this year. Each country will do a country report jointly. There's a team in each country with all the concerned ministries, universities, etc. It's usually a team of about 20 people, then working with us. And we got our first report from Uruguay, Mujeres en Ciencia, Tecnología y Innovación, un problema de justicia. That just came to us. They are thrilled. And it was a retired dean of the physics department who was the first woman to be in such a role in that country who really pushed for the project to happen there. So as I said, we want to be able to understand science policy, understand the statistics, and the outputs of the project will go into the UNESCO Observatory, Global Observatory of Science, Technology, and Policy Instruments, as well as into the UNESCO database for statistics. And what I hope will happen is then once we identify where really are the most important gaps that we can do something about, that's where we'll target our funding. Because so far we've taught 200 high-level government employees. We've had 14 agencies around the world involved. We've had 5,000 downloads from the website of our publications, and there's the website. From that website, you can get to all the other websites that I either have mentioned or will mention, because there's a big site called Women in Science. And having heard about our project, the International Mathematical Union approached us to join their project proposal they were putting forward to the International Council of Science with a project called A Global Approach to the Gender Gap in Mathematical and Natural Sciences, How to Measure It, How to Reduce It. So we've been participating with them for a year. You can see who some of the other partner institutions are. There were 3 things we're working on: a joint global survey, and they're going to use the SAGA survey of drivers and barriers as the core and build on that with things that come from the American Institute of Physics surveys, create a database of good practices, and SAGA will be involved in that as well. And it's the second track, but the last I talk about is a study on publications. When they needed to come up with new algorithms to find out if authors in Asian languages where there's only an initial, is it a man or a woman? We can do 80% of publications without this, but there's that 20% that we need to be working on. So what else was UNESCO doing on gender equality in science? I mentioned the book on women in science. There was something called the World Science Forum in 1999. Since 1987, Sweden has been funding through UNESCO things for women in science. And then you all have heard of the Loreal Corporate Foundation's partnership with UNESCO for Women in Science, which is having its 20th anniversary this month. I mentioned earlier the World Water Assessment Program. I was involved working on gender indicators for water management, and then the United Nations General Assembly on my birthday in 2015 approved the International Day of Women and Girls in Science to be celebrated on 11 February every year. So that meant we had less than 2 months to organize the first one. We've now organized 3 of them. So I talked a little bit about the science report. I think if you have never thought about this issue before, this is very short and it's an easy place to start. Just read these few pages. It's a synthesis done by Sophia Hoyer, who is with YSAT and used to be the executive director of Gender Insight. And it talks about some of the things that she thinks we need to fix the system. And some of these suggestions to research institutions are commit to gender equality, support diversity through funding, programming, and monitoring how you're doing, introduce fellowships and grants for underrepresented groups. For employers, adopt open, transparent, competitive recruitment and advancement policies, adopt strategies for increasing diversity, and support women in training and access to funding. So the Loreal Partnership does a lot of things, but in terms of functions towards the STI goals of the SAGA project, it creates role models, it provides funding to young women scientists, and it gives recognition to women scientists further on in their career. And last year, I had the great pleasure of meeting Michelle Simmons from Australia. She's Person of the Year in Australia this year for her work in quantum computing. She is so cool. It's just unbelievable. So I'm not going to go into all the details about Women in Science program, but 3 women who won this award have gone on to receive the Nobel Prize. They have a manifesto about women in science that you can go to this website and sign if you agree to commit to these 7 principles. I'm going fast because of time, so I'm not going to read them all. The education sector at Unesco is looking at primary and secondary education, and they find that the differences start in early childhood education, even in game playing, and that has to be reflecting the influence of the people around them. There are, in many countries, too few girls in school, and their educational opportunities are limited, and so that in itself leads to less women going on to STEM education. Schools are fundamentally important for increasing girls' interest in science, and this is particularly thinking about developing countries because UNESCO is trying to help the countries that can't help themselves. Then there's the Organization for Women in Science for the Developing World, funded by Sweden at our center in Trieste, Italy, and it provides fellowships. It has the Elsevier Award for Women in Science, which is given out every year at the American Association for Advancement of Science annual meeting, and it has all kinds of networking opportunities and advice, and it has national chapters, just like Loreal does. You can join it if you want to. I joined, even though 90% of the members are in developing countries. I felt it was a good thing to support them, and it's you can go to that website to do so. Gender Insight is a project of OST to support getting the word out about how important it is to have women in science, innovation, technology, and engineering, which is what SIGHT is. So it's insight into gender, or gender insight. It's been a partner with the ICSU project and with SAGA, and it really is looking at the link between science, women, and development, that all 3 have to go together. So, going back to before I was a gender focal point at UNESCO, I was working on climate policy, and I was going to the UNFCCC IPCC COP meetings. When I went to COP 13 in 2017, I was doing a side event on the ethical dimensions and resilience in the face of climate change, but two new women's lobbying groups were created at that meeting, and I was invited to join both of them, so I did, even though one was called Women Ministers for the Environment, and I said, I'm not a minister, but they said, no, you should join us anyway. So I got known as being important in that field, even though I didn't know anything about it at that point. And the director of the Division of Gender Equality saw that and thought that that would really look good. So she made me be in charge of a big thing at the World Climate Conference 3, which happened in 2009. World Climate Conference 1 created the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Climate Conference 2 created the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Platform on Climate Change. And we thought, World Climate Conference 3 is going to create something too. Well, it did. It created the Global Framework for Climate Services, the data coming in from the meteorological community, the climate change, climate science community. How do you transform that into stuff that's useful for people on the ground? And so we said, well, you have to think about how it's going to be useful for women on the ground, especially in those places where women are marginalized, aren't educated, and don't have access to the normal communication media, like your weather bulletin given to the Farm Bureau, that sort of thing. Then, in that same year, the Women and Gender constituency became one of the stakeholder groups in the UNFCCC. For COP21, the Paris Agreement, we had to look at the language there very carefully. France really wanted it to be a success, which it was, but they wanted there to be stuff on gender, and they wanted it to be a specific section, but instead we got these words mentioned, and we consider that a halfway success. But now the work program is going forward, and things that exist that are tools that countries can use go onto a special site on gender and climate change on the UNFCCC website. So at World Climate Conference 3, here are some things that I was learning at the same time that I was organizing this conference. I was learning it from our speakers. 80% of refugees are women and children. 70% of the poor are women. Why is that? Because women don't go to school as often, and therefore they're not as literate, and therefore they make up a greater percentage of the poor, and therefore they are more vulnerable. 35 to 80% of farmers at a global level are women. Those women farmers generally don't have any legal title to the land they're farming on, so they tend to get the worst land in the community. In developing countries, there are also effects related to gender when you think about climate change. Women are more concerned about sustainability and environmental issues. The current issue of The Economist talks about how sustainability investing appeals much more strongly to women than it does to men, and I have to say I agree with that because I've been doing it my whole adult life. Women drive less and take public transportation more. So all of these things are not biological or physical. They are related to the socially constructed identities that we have in society. And even though women in developing countries may be marginalized, by being forced to study their environment just to be able to come out with a livelihood for their families, they actually are learning a lot about nature. And therefore, we think they can bring solutions to climate resilience. After that, I worked with 12 UN agencies to do an entire conference on the gender dimensions of weather and climate services. We decided to cover 5 topics: water, disasters, agriculture, health, and climate science. And some of the recommendations that we came out with in general are on the screen. We helped to influence a number of processes that came after that. I thought you might be interested in the health panel, which is actually one of the ones I was not involved in. I was involved in almost all the rest of them. So the person mentioned that they were doing this at the time of the conference, just doing a Google search, climate change and public health, 21,000 hits. Climate change, public health, and gender, 117, and when you add policy, only 15 papers. I don't think it's changed a whole lot since then. There does seem to be a different vulnerability based on gender, more about risk-taking on the part of men and conservative behavior on the part of women, or on social constraints that women face in the face of disasters. For example, try to imagine a woman in a sari running from a tsunami or swimming. That's why we see that the fatalities amongst women are often superior in certain kinds of climate-related disasters. We also know that we need to really think about how we're explaining things. This isn't necessarily climate-related, but the example that was given was an epidemic of avian flu in Egypt, where 70% of the fatalities were women, because when the news went out, everybody, you have to kill the chickens because they're carrying this horrible pathogen. The women thought, but the chicken is my only livelihood, and they took their chickens into the house to stay in their bedroom. Then the final thing that I was doing in the run-up to COP21 is I was invited by the French Senate to talk to them about the differences between men and women and how important the gender dimension was in climate change. And these, I won't go into it, but these were the things that they took away from the talks of me and the other speakers, and they tried very hard to get those embedded into the agreement that came from Paris. And since then, I've been working with the High Commission on Equality between Men and Women on a monthly basis, and it's a great pleasure for me. I was also asked to speak at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but that was not possible because it was the UNESCO General Conference. So I'd just like to say thank you and see if there's any questions.
We have time for one question.
Thank you very much for this very inspiring talk. It's me. I saw a lot about different NGOs, societies, associations, projects, panels, and it's a bit dizzy. And
for me too.
Yes, I mean you participate in it so much. And my question is, since you said that the UNESCO spent a whole year doing research to see what really mattered, and the UNESCO is amongst the big players, how connected are all those societies, NGOs, in deciding what matters? Because some people may also spend another year while you've got the answer.
That's why we try to go to international conferences, so that all the organizations that work on this topic are aware of what we're doing and we're aware of their doing, to join forces as much as possible. And for example, that's why we're not looking at any countries in Europe, because the European Commission, through She Figures, is doing that. We're just going to put their data into our database. That's what the UNESCO Institute of Statistics already does. And the DG Research is very happy that that's how it's working. And besides just trying to keep connected, it's like, don't take ownership for things. Just put the products out there. But until we have the data back from at least the pilot countries, I don't feel comfortable saying, this is the biggest problem, we've identified it, and you need to go solve that. I think the problems are going to be different in different situations, different countries. For example, I know Malaysia. Malaysia has lots of women in tech and in engineering. Why? because of historical reasons that was where they wanted women to work in the past. I have a very good friend from Malaysia, but that's not what she works on. She works on climate change. So finding out these things, and if you wanted to look at your own population of Pasteur, for example, you could all take the survey of drivers and barriers, make a simplified version that's useful for you, and then you might say, we have three main problems that we never really even knew we had.
Right.
I don't know if you want me to take it.
No, thank you very much. We can do after the cocktail, so we don't have solar. So I want to introduce my English class, Sky Maskov. She is permanent researcher at INSEAD. She has a master in public health from the University of Pasteur. She worked in Australia and the US. She's already secured around 3 million euro in funding, including postdoc fellowships and 17 awards in both all France, Australia, and the US. She is evaluator for Marie Curie fellowships, National Loreal Unesco Awards for Women Science. She was also director of mentoring committee, and she will come to show a little bit of her experience on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction, and thank you so much for the invitation to speak about mentoring. I'm very happy to talk to you about some mentoring programs for young women scientists that have been involved in. So first, what is mentoring? In Greek mythology, Mentor was the tutor of Telemachus, the son of Odysseus, when Odysseus left for the Trojan War. And since the publication of the book The Adventures of Telemachus in the 18th century, the term mentor has been used with the modern term that we know today. And so mentoring, we talk about mentoring as a voluntary and confidential relationship in which an experienced individual, which we call a mentor, guides and supports another individual that is less experienced, which we call a mentee. And because things are easier when someone shows you the way, mentoring has been linked to mentees' career development and growth. And it is thus critical to have mentoring to achieve full potential at every career stage in any career. And indeed, many scientific leaders attribute their success to having good mentors at critical times in their career. There's been an increasing interest in mentoring. And if we look at PubMed, the first publication about mentoring was in 1977, where it was more about mentoring in the nursing and medical field. And today we have almost 6,000 publications in PubMed about mentoring. And this has been increasing almost exponentially from around 50 publications in the 1990s to more than 700 publications a year today. So what exactly is a mentor? There are several types of helping relationships that can help you grow professionally, and the mentor is probably the most encompassing of all of them. So a mentor is a person who inspires you and who you identify as a role model in one or more domains, who has gone through a particular experience and from who you would like to learn. A mentor shares his or her experiences, guides you and supports you in your quest to achieve a particular goal. Sorry, it's been a long time since I've spoken English. So you may have as many mentors as the number of goals that you would like to achieve, and it is very common to have multiple mentors throughout one's career. So, for example, let's say that you are contemplating applying for a permanent position or for a grant application. You are going to look around you towards people who have gone through those previous experiences to try and learn from them. And you can apply mentorship to anything in life, really, from planning your wedding, buying an apartment, or going on retirement, and that applies to the professional life as well. So basically, a mentor is a role model. An advisor's role is a lot more formal. An advisor is someone who works in the same field as you and who is able to give you specific advice and feedback to solve a specific problem. A coach is someone who is professionally trained specifically in coaching and who is able to help you clarify your goals and to find the best strategy to achieve them. A coach is able to help you improve and achieve your goals even if he or she is not in your field. And finally, a sponsor is a senior leader with influence who has the power to promote you to advance within an organization. And a mentor could have several of these roles at the same time. So why is it important to mentor young women scientists in particular? Women meet more career barriers in science, and that is because their careers may progress at a slower pace because of childbearing, maternity leave, and gender roles in society. And consequently, they are underrepresented in leadership positions in academia, but this is also true for the industry. And we saw some figures about that with the previous 2 talks. Consequently, women lack female role models. And because women encounter specific challenges relating to balancing work and family, they need additional support and encouragement, at least for now. And mentoring can be one way to help women to overcome these barriers. Studies have consistently shown that mentoring is an important catalyst of scientific careers, and especially for women. Women with mentors publish more frequently and are more likely to receive grant funding, and mentoring in women is also linked to increased job satisfaction and self-confidence. And therefore, mentoring is critical to the success of women in science. So, where do you find these mentors? You could find mentors at your place of work, and that has the advantage that a mentor can help you identify the skills you need at work that are specific. This mentor would share similar core values, is often able to give you informed feedback to complement your area of expertise. It's someone that you already know, admire, and respect, and they can help you become an insider faster. But you could also find a mentor not at your place of work, and that has other advantages. For example, it can help you identify the skills that you will need to develop another type of career. They can suggest different core values, and they're often able to give more candid feedback than someone in your own field. And that definitely opens your network as well. So in both instances, there are some benefits. So sometimes it's easy to find a mentor and quite natural, and sometimes it isn't. And for those instances where it isn't so easy, some associations have created some mentoring programs to facilitate access to mentors in people and in women in particular. And the 3 types of mentoring programs that I've been involved in were the program from the Association for Women in Science for the Massachusetts chapter in Boston during my postdoc, the Postdoctoral Association of the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, and more recently the Family Science program. So first, the Mass Airways program. So everything started with Joanne Kamens, who is the CEO of Avian, a society that shares plasmids, who, when she was a young scientist, looked for role models around her, and she didn't see any senior female role models who had the time to share experiences with her. So she started a reflection about mentoring, and she read a book called Every Other Thursday, which described the meetings of a group of women in the 1970s who used to meet every month, and so there were 6 or 7 of them, and they did some peer mentoring to help each other progress through their difficulties and challenges. And this book inspired her to create some mentoring programs with mentoring circles into American Association of Professional Women, the Healthcare Business Women's Association for the Boston chapter, and Mass Airways. And And so the Mass Air-Risk Mentoring Program focuses particularly at experienced scientists who can be women or men, working either in academia or industry as mentors. And as mentees, it focuses on young women scientists from any sector and any career level. The way that it works is that it works in mentoring circles. So the circles are groups of individuals that meet together on a regular basis upon for an agreed upon length of time, so usually a couple of hours. And the group's primary purpose is to help mentees accomplish two tasks. The first one is to set important goals for the mentees, and the second one is to help the mentees build competence and character to reach those goals. So the circles work with 1 to 2 mentors and 4 to 5 mentees each, and they meet face-to-face once a month during the academic year. And since the beginning of the program, in 10 years, over 1,000 people have participated in this program. So it's met a lot of success. The way that it was organized was that the first meeting, there was usually a roundtable introduction and a definition of each mentee's goal to start the program. And once trust is built among the people, among the participants, the topic of monthly meetings encompass experiences, challenges and opportunities, doubts and successes, and for the purpose of enhancing self-confidence, communication skills, leadership practices, and commitment to one's career. The topics that were most often addressed among mentoring circles have been career trajectories in academia or industry, alternative careers, work-life balance, professionalism, networking, or negotiation skills, for example. And across the years, across the academic year, the mentees who they develop mentoring skills themselves by peer mentoring one another, and they are offered at the end of the program to become mentors themselves the next year. The typical calendar of the program is the following. So over the summer, there would be a communication campaign by the association to recruit mentors and mentees. Then applications would be collected, analyzed, and then some matching would happen. So based on the interests and goals defined between both mentors and mentees, the volunteers would match people together to form the circles. In September, there would be a mentors-only training and an orientation session for mentees, and everyone would meet at the kickoff event. So this event would take place to introduce the program to everyone. There would be a first-time meeting within each circle and icebreaker games to help start the relationships. During the program, some connectors would get in touch to check on the circles, and after a mentors-only workshop, there would be in May the end-of-year celebration with a review of the circles, testimonials, and acknowledgement and celebration of the mentors. So I participated in one of those circles as a mentor in 2012 and 2013, and this is what my circle looked like. So the mentors were myself, and I was at the time a postdoctoral fellow, and the other mentor was an instructor at Harvard Medical School with some experience in industry. And we had 5 mentees in our circle: a lab technician from Harvard who had relationship problems with her supervisor and had the goal to change jobs, a PhD student who had the goal to carefully plan her postdoc to make a career in academia, a PhD student who had the objective to expand her network and find a job in industry, a postdoctoral fellow who had the goal to find a permanent position in academia after her postdoc, and a research engineer who wanted to figure out whether or not to go back to her doctoral studies to be happy in her current job. And so that was very nice to see the evolution of this circle as the year progressed. So what the mentors say usually about this program is that it's nice to have some support and encouragement from everyone, that it feels good to set some concrete goals for personal and career development. Also, some people have talked about the diversity of fields brought to a circle, and that's something that's feasible when people do not work in the same institution or in the same field. So circles are much usually making sure that people are not in the same field. It made it a very neutral place to raise issues and ask questions, and mentees got a lot of information and advice for both professional and personal development. And we had a testimonial for a mentor who said that as a mentor, she enjoys seeing how the mentoring circle recognized, set, and achieved goals throughout the year. And even if she was the mentor, she herself benefited a lot from her mentees as well to learn things. The success factors for such a program are commitment to attendance, as an individual's inability to attend one of the meetings is going to disrupt everyone in the circle. Confidentiality is a big success factor, as this is really truly the basis of mentoring relationships and rapport within the circle, as people are very different, and the diversity makes the success of these kind of relationships. So following this experience, I transposed this experience to the postdoctoral association of the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, where I was a postdoctoral fellow, and I created a similar program with mentoring circles, this time for postdoctoral fellows who were either men or women. And working with a team of 6 members, we launched a pilot phase in 2014 with three circles. There were 2 mentors per circles who were senior postdocs, and 5 mentees who were junior postdocs, for a total of 21 participants for this pilot phase. The program is still ongoing today with around 50 participants for this academic year. The experience was published by the current leaders of the program in Nature Biotechnology, so you can read about that if you're interested. And the program obtained the Program Award for Culture of Excellence in Mentoring from Harvard Medical School in 2016. So that was a very nice experience also. And so when I went back to France, so I've been a member of Femmes et Sciences since 2008, and following my contacts with the American Association, I wanted to liaise again with the French Association and talk about mentoring, because it had very much positively affected me. And I discovered that a program was ongoing in Montpellier. They were doing a pilot phase for a similar program. And this regional program in Montpellier is now running since 2015. And the program coordinator is May Morris from the Université de Montpellier. And we talked with May and with the board of Femmes et Sciences, and we are now in the process of creating a regional program for the Paris region, which will be coordinated by myself. And last year, in November, the association held the annual meeting of Femmes et Sciences on mentoring, and the meeting proceedings are available from Femmes et Sciences. So you can see that mentoring is becoming a very important topic for the Femmes et Sciences Association. So just to show you the Femmes et Sciences program in Montpellier, the mentors in this program are experienced scientists, either men and women, either from academia or industry, who are working in different institutions as the mentees. And the mentees are PhD students, and now they are integrating postdoctoral fellows as well, as the program is growing. So it's different than the mentoring circle programs that I've encountered in the US. This is not a circle, but a one-on-one interaction. And there are mentor and mentee pairs, and there are around 40 of them in this program this year. And the matching of mentor-mentee pairs is done a bit more naturally through a speed meeting during which mentees choose their own mentors. And this program is structured with 3 types of meeting. There are the individual meetings once a month, and also group meetings and workshops where all mentees and mentors attend as well. So in the individual meetings from the questionnaires that are sent, we know that a third of those meetings are about the PhD in itself. So mentees and mentors talk about the thesis, the events happening during the PhD, and the career journey of the mentee and the mentor. A third of the topics are about career perspectives, such as life post-PhD, postdoc, finding a job, going into academia or industry. And a third is about work-life balance. Some examples of workshops in this Montpellier program were preparing a job interview, for example, postdoctoral training abroad, and networking tools. And for group meetings, there are two types of meetings that are held for everyone, every mentee. First, testimonials from successful scientific women who are alternating between academia or industry, and mentoring circles, so-called, where all mentors and mentees meet to discuss a particular topic, such as, for example, self-confidence, work-life balance, international careers. That topic is chosen by the mentees. And the asset and the originality in this program is that the mentees meet often together, and they form a remarkable network of young women scientists who feel in the same boat and grow together during this time of their career. So the impact of this program has been extremely positive. The mentees' main comments talk about the fact that this program is, according to them, essential for young scientists, both in terms of the workshops or the individual follow-up with mentors, that it's important to be in an environment of women scientists to have female role models around them. They are happy about the interactions with the mentors, for the guidance and supports that they receive, and for the information of what it's like to be a scientist in academia or in the industry. And talking to a mentor from a different institute helps them to have a bigger picture view on the possible career that they are on offer as they report. So next to this program in Montpellier, we're launching the pilot phase of the Paris Region program for the Famille Sciences Association. And so here, the program will be similar to the Montpellier program with mentors and mentees who are, so mentors are experienced scientists, either women or men, and mentees are either PhD students or postdoctoral fellows. We have collected applications from 4 mentors and 4 mentees up to now, and so this group is going to meet in 2018, and we're going to start the pilot phase with that group. And the aim is to develop this program by recruiting more mentors and mentees throughout the year, and to have really a similar structure with one-on-one meetings, workshops, and group meetings, so similar to Montpellier. And if successful, as we hope, the program will be extended to the Université Paris-Saclay. And so the takeaway messages from this talk are that first, mentoring accelerates scientific careers, so it's important for any career in science. Young women scientists particularly need role models and mentors at a phase of their careers with high risk of self-doubt or dropout. It is important to seek mentors because mentors do not come to you, so you need to actively seek them, either you alone or through programs. And when it's not easy to do so by yourself, or even just to have more mentors to share different perspectives, you can turn towards the mentoring programs that exist, and several programs exist around the world. The Famille Sciences Association is recruiting mentees and mentors for the Paris mentoring program, so if you're interested, please do get in touch. I would like to end this talk by acknowledging Carolina Mizuno. Thank you very much for the invitation, Claudine Herman and Famille Sciences, and also my very own mentors and many people who have inspired me in my careers. I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Marina. We have time for questions, so...
No, it works. So why the difference between the mentoring system that you have been living in the States with respect to this one? So that means the circle versus the one-to-one person. Do you think there is an advantage? Is it better? Is it a difference in culture, or it's easier because you don't have to gather 4 people at the same day, at the same time? What is your experience on that?
Mm-hmm. So it's not really a cultural difference, because in the US there are some women in science associations that have went on with the one-on-one interactions as well, but it's just a matter of handiness. In the US, for example, where I was in Boston, all the hospitals and universities were gathered in the same area. There were 3 campuses, so people would meet very easily after work in one of those campuses, and it was easy to gather 7 people in the same room once a month. In the Paris area, it could be different if people presumably work in different parts of Paris. So, and also because the Montpellier program was successful with the one-on-one interaction, we thought we would go on with that particular program to start off with. But both structures have their benefits that are different, so anything could be done, really.
I actually have one question. You mentioned that the mentees would choose their mentors, and the mentors could be either men or women. Did you see any bias towards either? Would you choose someone to be your mentor if you are a woman, or vice versa? Did you see any bias in their choosing?
So that was in the Montpellier program, and also in the US. So in the Montpellier program, there were only 4 male mentors for now. I don't think that May has been able to observe any bias for now. It was mostly, so the choice is mostly about the feeling in the relationship, and also having different expertise. So I can't really tell you if there was a bias, but we will see as we have more data.
Hi, thanks for that talk. I'm right here.
Thank you.
I didn't quite understand completely how you were defining success of the program. I'm just thinking about it in a scientific rigor way, like maybe if you have this other group that doesn't have mentoring, they would have done just fine. That sounds really negative, I know, but I just want to know how you define a successful end to one of these groups.
So that was mostly about the satisfaction of the mentees and the mentors, so it was more qualitative as opposed to quantitative. But through the end of year celebration program, we have testimonials, and people talk about what it has changed for them as the group progressed, and every mentee was able to talk about that. So it was mostly qualitative.
So it could be kind of fun if you wanted to show that you're having a positive impact, to say that you have not a dropout, or you have reduced percentage of dropout if you want to quantify it somehow. It could be nice, since you are showing that it's positive. It's just because it sounds great,
yes,
but it's hard to grasp that impact. So,
definitely.
Thanks.
We will need to look at if the person is being mentored elsewhere, and if the mentoring program is being, if the person is still in the mentoring program. But with time and follow-up, it's definitely interesting to look at that. Yes.
Thank you very much, Marina. We can keep further questions later.
Thank you.
I'd like to invite the members